On the planet Arca Prime, a world known for its harsh environments and towering beasts, there lived a human healer named Eli Grant. He had been taken years ago by the Zalari Empire, an advanced race of blue-skinned aliens with golden eyes and majestic wings. The Zalari were warriors, and they thought of humans as clever but weak. They never imagined that a human could offer something so valuable. Yet Eli had earned their respect in a way no one expected. He had a gift. He could heal the gravest injuries and illnesses, things even the best Zalari medics couldn't fix. His reputation spread far across the galaxy, and soon he was known as the Soul Stitcher, a healer capable of repairing the damage that even advanced Zalari technology couldn't undo. Despite his skill, Eli was kept in chains. He wore a collar that controlled his movements and had guards surrounding him at all times. The Zalari Empire treated him as an essential tool, but they never fully trusted him. He was kept locked away in a large healing hall, a place where he could do his work but had little freedom. Eli, however, didn't seem to mind the chains. He worked with the same calm, gentle demeanor as always, helping those who were brought to him, no matter who they were. His work was more than just healing wounds. It was about restoring hope, no matter how broken the person was. One of the few people who interacted with Eli was Kavi, a young Zalari girl who assisted him in the healing chambers. She had always been curious about Eli. To her, humans were strange, especially him. She had never understood why he helped people who had treated him like an object, even when they were cruel or disrespectful. Yet every time someone came to him with a wound, whether they were an enemy soldier or a high-ranking official, Eli would drop everything to help, his hands steady, his voice soothing, and his work meticulous. He never hesitated, even if the person had harmed him before. Kavi didn't know what to make of this. It didn't make sense to her. Humans were supposed to be weak, not strong like this. One night while walking through the palace, Kavi overheard something she shouldn't have. Two high-ranking Zalari officials were talking in hushed voices, and she caught a glimpse of their conversation. They were discussing Eli, and their words chilled her. One of them said that Eli had become too important to the Empire. The humans' reputation was growing, and the Zalari couldn't allow that. They feared that if others found out how valuable Eli was, it would make them look weak. The other official agreed, suggesting that Eli should be erased quietly, perhaps by making it look like an accident or a sickness. Kavi's heart sank as she realized what this meant. Eli was in danger. The very people he had helped, the ones he had healed time and time again, were planning to get rid of him. They didn't see him as a person. They only saw him as something they could control, something that could be discarded when no longer needed. Kavi's thoughts raced. She couldn't let this happen. Despite all the differences between her and Eli, despite all the confusion and curiosity she had about him, she knew that the world needed him, the universe needed him, and she couldn't just stand by and watch him be taken away. With newfound determination, Kavi ran to Eli's chambers, knowing that time was running out. She had to warn him before it was too late. Eli was kneeling beside a wounded Zalari warrior, his hands glowing softly, as he used a mix of medicine and quiet skill to close the deep gash along the alien's side. The patient groaned, then relaxed, as the pain faded. The large healing room, normally quiet, echoed with the sounds of breathing and the occasional clink of metal, his chains brushing the floor as he moved. Eli didn't stop to rest, not even for a moment. He never did. He was focused, calm, always careful, even if his back ached and his wrists were sore from the metal cuffs. That was when the door flew open and Kavi ran in, her wings fluttering, behind her in panic. Her face was pale, and her voice was shaking, but she didn't care about the guards who turned sharply to stop her. She shouted Eli's name, the fear in her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Eli stood up quickly, surprised by her sudden entrance. Kavi rushed past the guards and grabbed his arm, ignoring the shocked looks around the room. She told him everything. What she had heard, what they were planning, how they wanted to end him. Eli's face didn't change much, but a shadow crossed his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, then gently pulled his arm away and walked over to a patient who had just arrived, a small Zalari child with burns across her chest. He knelt down and began his work again, speaking softly to the child, trying to ease her fear. Kavi was stunned. She had just told him that his life was at risk, and yet he returned to his duties like nothing had changed. She couldn't understand it. She stood there in silence, watching him wrap a soft cloth around the girl's shoulder and whisper something that made her smile through her pain. Later, when the child was sleeping peacefully, Eli finally turned to Kavi. His voice was low, and his words were simple. He told her that he had known for a long time that they would come for him one day. He said he was not afraid of death. What truly scared him was the idea of leaving people behind who still needed healing, still needed hope. Kavi didn't know what to say. She had grown up in a world where strength was measured by power, by weapons, by fear. But Eli's strength was something else. He helped those who had chained him. He showed kindness where others showed cruelty, and now, even when his life was in danger, his only worry was the pain of others. Kavi left the room that night with a strange heaviness in her chest. She couldn't sleep. The image of Eli's calm face, his steady hands, and his soft words kept coming back to her. She thought of all the things she had been taught about humans, that they were weak, selfish, and unworthy. Eli had proven all of it wrong. He had shown her something she had never seen in her own people, something stronger than weapons, something more powerful than fear. Compassion. The next morning, Kavi stood before the High Council chamber, trembling. The guards tried to stop her, but she pushed forward. She demanded to speak. The elders looked down at her from their high seats, surprised by her boldness. And then she spoke. Not just about the plan to kill Eli, but about everything he had done for them, for the Empire. She told them about the lives he had saved, the people he had comforted, the peace he had brought even while in chains. Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. She asked them if this was truly the kind of empire they wanted to be, one that kills its savior because he makes them feel weak. There was silence in the room. For the first time, the council listened. The days after Kavi's plea to the High Council were tense. Word spread quickly that the young Zalari had dared to stand up for the human healer, and many of the Empire's citizens were divided. Some viewed Eli as an essential asset, someone who had saved countless lives and deserved respect. Others, however, saw him only as a tool, a prisoner who existed to serve them and should remain in chains. The Empire's leaders, caught in the middle, remained silent. Behind the scenes, a plan was forming, one that would either secure Eli's place or seal his fate. Kavi, however, wasn't about to wait for the council's decision. She knew that inaction would lead to Eli's death. As she walked through the grand hallways of the palace, she felt the weight of the choices ahead. She couldn't just rely on the council. She needed to act before it was too late. She returned to Eli's chambers that evening, and as she entered, she found him sitting quietly by the window, gazing out at the dark sky. The soft glow of the city below cast a gentle light into the room, but there was something far away in his eyes. Kavi hesitated before speaking, unsure of how to approach him. Finally, she spoke up, telling him about the unrest among the Zalari. She explained that even though she had stood up for him, there were still those who wanted him gone. She could see the weariness in Eli's expression, but there was no surprise. He had known all along that this day might come. He nodded slowly, acknowledging her words, but his gaze never wavered from the stars outside. Eli's silence lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. He had been ready for this moment for a long time, but Kavi was not. She could feel her heart racing as she wondered if they had reached the point of no return. Eli finally spoke, his voice calm but with an edge of sadness. He said that he had never wanted to be a symbol for anything. He never sought to lead or be a hero. His only purpose had always been to heal, to fix what was broken, to bring comfort where there was none. He spoke about how the Zalari Empire had treated him, first as a prisoner, then as a tool, and now, finally, as something to be discarded. Despite everything, he wasn't angry. He wasn't filled with rage or hatred. He simply felt sorrow for the people who had treated him as less than human, and for the world that had taught them to see value only in power. Kavi listened, her heart torn. She wanted to do something, anything, to change the path that seemed set for him. But how could she? The council had all the power. Eli had been kept in chains for years, and no matter how much Kavi cared for him, she was still bound by the same system that had oppressed him. Yet she couldn't just let him fade away like so many others. There had to be another way. A way that didn't involve letting the Empire destroy what he had built. She made a decision then, one that surprised even her. She would help him escape, not just for himself, but for the hope he represented. If she couldn't change the Empire's mind, she would at least make sure Eli lived to see a world where kindness and healing mattered more than power. The next morning, Kavi slipped into the healing chamber with a small package hidden under her robe. She had gathered everything they would need, small tools, hidden weapons, and a map of secret tunnels beneath the palace that only a few knew about. Eli had never asked her to help him escape, but she had already made up her mind. Together, they could leave this place, this world of chains and fear, and find a new future, one where Eli's gifts could flourish. As they quietly prepared, Kavi realized that this wasn't just about saving Eli. It was about saving the essence of who he was. And that was something she couldn't let the Empire erase. With everything in place, they knew time was running out. The council would make their decision soon, and they couldn't risk being caught. As the first light of dawn crept through the palace windows, Eli and Kavi moved swiftly, silently, down the hidden corridors. They had a plan, but it was a dangerous one. The future was uncertain, and they were stepping into the unknown. But, for the first time in years, Eli felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Eli and Kavi moved quickly through the palace's hidden corridors, their footsteps barely making a sound. The map Kavi had provided led them through a series of narrow, dimly lit tunnels beneath the palace, a labyrinth that few knew about. Eli's chains rattled softly with every step, but he barely seemed to notice. Kavi kept glancing over her shoulder, her heart pounding with each turn they took. She knew they didn't have much time. The decision of the High Council was imminent, and once it was made, the Zalari Empire would either act to eliminate Eli or use him as their prized tool for the foreseeable future. As they reached a narrow passage leading outside, Kavi could feel the weight of the situation. She had made a choice. She wasn't going to let Eli be erased, not if she could help it. But every decision they made now was one step closer to either their freedom or their destruction. The stakes had never been higher. As they neared the exit, they found themselves in a small hidden room, a room that was supposed to be a last safety net for the royal family. The walls were thick, insulated to block out any sound, but the moment Kavi touched the hidden lever to reveal the hidden door, her heart skipped. They were so close. But as she swung the door open, a cold voice interrupted her. It was one of the palace guards. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his voice sharp and accusing. Kavi froze. The guard wasn't alone. There were two others, and they were blocking the only way out. Panic surged through her, but she took a deep breath and stood tall. She had never been in a situation like this before, confronted with the Empire's enforcers while trying to escape. Yet, as the guard took a step forward, Eli calmly placed a hand on her shoulder and stepped ahead. His face was serene, almost as if he wasn't facing a life-threatening situation at all. The guards eyed him warily, unsure of how to react to the human in chains standing before them. Eli's reputation preceded him. The Soul Stitcher had healed many of them, their soldiers and leaders, and even the Emperor himself. He was an asset, valuable, even with the chains. The tension was palpable as Eli spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm leaving." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. They knew better than to disobey a direct command. But this was different. Eli was no longer just a prisoner. He had become something more, something powerful in his own right. Kavi watched, her heart in her throat, as the guards hesitated. But then the worst possible thing happened. Behind them, a large group of palace soldiers arrived, weapons drawn and eyes filled with suspicion. The sound of armor clanking filled the room, and Kavi realized they were completely surrounded. For a moment, it seemed as though they had been caught, their plan crumbling. The guards raised their weapons, and Eli stood still, his face unwavering. Kavi's hands shook, but she refused to give up. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Then, just as things seemed hopeless, A voice broke through the tension. It was the voice of Kavi's mentor, an older, wiser Zalari named Vorlan. He had taught her much about the ways of the Empire and the power dynamics that controlled their world. And now, Vorlan was standing at the back of the group, his wings folded behind him. He didn't seem like he belonged with the soldiers. His expression was serious, but there was something almost conspiratorial in his eyes. "Lower your weapons," Vorlan commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The soldiers hesitated, confused by his presence. Vorlan walked past them, standing in front of Eli and Kavi. "The Empire cannot survive without its soul," he said simply, his eyes meeting Kavi's. He looked at Eli next, his gaze softening. "You were right to protect him," he added. "Eli is more than just a healer. He's a symbol of what the Empire has forgotten." His words struck a chord deep inside Kavi. She realized in that moment that Vorlan wasn't just speaking to them. He was speaking to the guards and the soldiers, too. He was challenging the very core of the Empire's beliefs. He wasn't willing to let them destroy Eli, not if it meant destroying something more precious in the process. The soldiers, still unsure, lowered their weapons as Vorlan gave a quiet nod. "Let them go," he ordered, and for once, they obeyed. Kavi and Eli exchanged glances, their breaths coming in short bursts. They had been granted an opportunity, but it wasn't one they could squander. Vorlan turned to leave, his wings lifting slightly as he disappeared back into the palace. Kavi didn't wait. She grabbed Eli's hand, and together, they fled into the night. The darkness of the outside world was both a comfort and a danger. They didn't know what awaited them beyond the palace walls, but they had no other choice. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they were free to find it together. The escape was only the beginning of Eli and Kavi's journey. After slipping through the hidden passages of the palace and running into the night, they found themselves outside the walls of the imperial city, surrounded by darkness and the vast wilderness. Kavi's heart was still racing from the confrontation with the guards, but Eli's calmness, despite everything that had happened, gave her a sense of hope. They didn't know where to go or what to do next, but they had each other, and that was more than enough for now. The wilderness outside the city was filled with dangers of its own. Wild creatures, harsh weather, and the constant threat of Zalari patrols searching for them could easily overwhelm any plan they might try to form. But Kavi couldn't help but feel something she hadn't in a long time. Freedom. She was no longer confined by the palace walls, by the Empire's rules. They had the chance to start again, to forge a new path. For the next several days, Eli and Kavi traveled by night, hiding by day in the thick forests that surrounded the Empire's heart. Eli's chains were heavy, but he had learned to live with them, and as they moved, he taught Kavi how to survive in the wilderness. Despite the danger they faced, Eli never let his focus stray from the one thing that mattered most: survival. His knowledge of plants, animals, and medicine was invaluable as they journeyed through the wilderness. He showed Kavi how to find food and water, how to navigate the treacherous terrain, and how to stay hidden from the Empire's scouts. As they traveled, their bond grew stronger, and they shared stories of their past, their hopes, and their fears. Kavi learned more about Eli's life, his time on Earth, the experiments, and the harsh treatment he had endured at the hands of the Zalari. Eli, in turn, learned more about Kavi's upbringing, her training, and the lessons she had learned, growing up within the Empire. One evening, as they set up camp by a quiet stream, Kavi found herself staring at the stars. The world around them seemed so much larger than it had ever felt before, and the future seemed full of possibilities. But there was still a part of her that feared what lay ahead. Eli had given up his life as a healer to escape the Empire's grasp, and now he had no place in the world. He had risked everything for the chance at freedom. Kavi couldn't help but worry that they might never be safe, that the Empire would find them and drag Eli back, putting him back in chains. She couldn't bear the thought of that happening. The next day, after they had traveled a few more miles, they encountered a small group of refugees. These people, from all different corners of the Empire, had fled the oppressive rule of the Zalari, each with their own story of hardship. They were wary of Eli at first, unsure of who he was and what his presence meant. But after Kavi explained who he was, the healer who had saved countless lives, the one who had never turned his back on anyone. They welcomed him with open arms. The refugees had no official leader, but their shared desire for freedom had brought them together, and they had learned to survive on their own terms. Seeing the group, Eli finally understood the depth of what he had given up. It wasn't just his work as a healer that the Zalari Empire had stolen from him. It was his chance to help others, to be part of something greater than himself. Over time, Eli became more than just a healer to the group. He became a symbol of hope. His presence reminded them all that the Empire wasn't all-powerful. Even the most feared and powerful regime had weaknesses. Kavi watched as Eli began to heal not only the sick and wounded, but the spirits of the refugees as well. His calm and compassionate nature gave them the strength they needed to keep fighting, to keep hoping. And in return, they helped him and Kavi in ways they hadn't expected. The refugees had valuable knowledge of the Empire's movements and the locations of secret hideouts that could offer them safety. They worked together to form a small but strong resistance against the Zalari Empire. As weeks passed, word of Eli's escape began to spread, and more people joined their cause. The Empire's fear of Eli, the healer who had saved their greatest warriors, grew, but so did the fire of rebellion in the hearts of those oppressed by the Empire's rule. Eli's quiet determination, Kavi's fierce loyalty, and the support of the refugees laid the foundation for something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. They hadn't just escaped the Empire, they had sparked a movement that would challenge the Empire's grip on the galaxy. Eli and Kavi knew the road ahead would be difficult, and there would be battles to fight. But they also knew they had something that the Empire could never destroy: hope. And that hope would be the force that changed the galaxy forever.